I'm excited to finally connect with you guys in this class, and I know we've had, well, I don't know how all of you feel, but I have definitely had a really surprising experience so far with this class. So this is the first time I've ever really done a class this way, in the sense that I knew where I was going to go with it, but then right before I started, a bunch of stuff changed in my mind, and I was kind of directed to do it in a different way, and I felt really excited about it. But then when I started the class and when I started recording the info, it was really weird, and I'm coming off a break as well. I've been on sabbatical, and when I started doing it, I had this really intense sort of just self-criticism come up, which was blocking me. Like the whole week last week, and even partly this week, I feel like I worked through it today and I got a lot of information. But it's interesting because I'm doing the cleanse with you, and so it's like I know what I'm talking about and I know what I want to say, but I have just not felt like the organization of it has come through the way that I've wanted it to. And so it's brought up a lot of stuff. And so today I wanted to talk about, first of all, kind of what my experience with the actual material has been and how I've done it. So it can maybe help some of you who are just kind of like, I know some of you have said, I feel like I'm not getting it, or I'm not quite connecting with it, or I'm not sure if I'm really connecting with my emotions or whatever it is. So I wanted to just touch on that, and then I'll leave some time at the end to answer any questions that you have. So I'm planning on being here about 30 minutes. So I'll talk for about 20, and then we'll leave like 10 minutes for questions. So I just want to say hi. Hey, Brad, Megan, and Gwen. I think those are and Gretchen, is that right? I can't say everyone's name, but welcome, and I'm glad you're here. So for those of you who are new that have never even connected with me on a live before, I'm usually pretty casual with these, and like I said, I'll just talk. If you comment along the way, I try to watch them and connect with them, but I may not be able to scroll through them till the end because sometimes the comments distract me a little bit. So first and foremost, I just want to say, with what we've connected with so far, what I've been trying to communicate through in the class is that our entire life force and our power and all that we are comes from our heart. And the heart is often the first thing that's left out of the equation in the lack matrix and how we've been raised. The heart is usually what is sacrificed. And so to really tune into the abundance matrix, to tune into what I call heaven on earth, we have to have our hearts, and we have to have our full hearts. And that means healing and restoring ourselves back to our wholeness and our fullness. And when we're in the process of doing that, all the things come up that have happened to us and all the reasons why we numb out our hearts to protect us, especially those of us who are empathic or highly sensitive, which I know a lot of you who take my classes are. And so this journey, it's not, as I've mentioned multiple times, it's not just a mind journey. This is a journey into the heart, and therefore into a world that is not linear and not necessarily logical either. It just is. It just is. And so what's fascinating to me about connecting with the heart, and then really when the attention was brought to me about these two chakras that we've been talking about this week, our invincibility and our uniqueness, is that often it's this energy that's going on between these three chakras that causes us to either be at war with ourselves or working with ourselves. And one of the most important thing that we can learn to develop is discernment, because our gifts and who we are, which stems from our heart, our invincibility, how we've survived, and our uniqueness, what just makes us uniquely us, which is kind of a miracle in and of itself. All of that is connected to our power, and it's neutral. It's neither bad nor good. And when we live in the lack matrix, when we've been programmed with that reality, we live in a reality in which we're always judging things as bad or good, right or wrong. And if it's right, then we can be for it. And if it's wrong, we have to be against it. If it's bad, we have to go to war with it. If it's good, we can accept it. And the problem with that is that all of that is us. The good and the bad. And the power that comes from this space that we've been connecting to, the synergy of our heart, our invincibility, and our uniqueness, I see that almost as our soul, that soul aspect of us. all of that is, like I said, it's in and of itself neutral, but it's incredibly powerful. So if we are navigating our reality in a way where we're in conflict with ourselves or at war with what we are, then it can be incredibly negative. The things that have made us invincible and the things that make us unique can be used against us and used against others. And likewise, when we have our discernment in line, when we are connecting to our actually what feels good and what is coming from the intention of restoration versus war or lack, the same gift, the same soul or synergy here can be used in an incredibly healing way. It can be powerful and healing and restorative and a good thing. And that's why ultimately it's neutral. You can't say whether it's bad or good, because in any given moment it can be different. And so as I've connected to my chakras in that way, my heart and then my invincibility and negativity, I've really seen, and this has been going on for quite a while, ever since I first discovered that I was an empath. I had a word to call it, and I can't even remember how that happened. I think someone told me or something, or mentioned it, and I heard the word, and something just resonated. And then when I started researching about empaths, I was like, wow, I've never seen it spelled out. I've never seen anyone describe me. It was like being seen for the first time. And that was several years ago. But since then, I've been trying to understand what this is, because in many ways I know that it can be therapeutic and healing for people, but I also feel like that same gift of being empathic has resulted in a lot of negative experiences in my life and me not necessarily knowing how to take care of myself. And so I've been really examining this for quite a while. And this last week, as I've gone through and really connected to these two chakras and asked myself, what is my gift and how does it work? And it's which is a powerful thing to ask, because if we don't understand how our gifts work, how our power works, again, it can be used against us. And if we're not including ourselves in the equation of how we navigate, it can be quite detrimental. And then when we're recovering from those detrimental experiences, it can feel like the gift or the thing or what we are, our very nature, is wrong. And I know for me, I spent a while thinking, like almost resenting the fact that I was empathic and resenting the fact that I cared and that I could feel everything, and that I didn't know how to discern when to help and when not to help. And I almost resented that side of me. And then I became ultra protective of myself, and then I started resenting people's needs and feeling overwhelmed by them, and then feeling scared by them. And I've gone through quite the journey of trying to really understand what I am and how my gifts work. And what I realized this week is that my uniqueness and my invincibility are something that I cannot be at war with anymore. And I think that war is part of that war was initiated first week 1. Like I said, something happened at the last minute. I was so excited about this class. And then at the last minute, like, my own insecurity just came up in a really strong way that I haven't experienced for a long time. It felt like this energy coming in super strong and looking at me like under a microscope, and not looking in love, but looking to find fault. And at first I was like, whoa, what is this? Is there like a weird energy in the group? And I was like projecting it outside of me. And then as I've been doing the work and really tuning in, I realized it's me. It's an aspect of me. And yes, it could be reflected in other people, and that's out of my control. But I know it's an aspect of me. And it's an aspect of when that side of me that has been steeped in lack is looking at me to find fault. Because if it's only about being right or wrong, and I'm wrong, then I need to be made aware that I'm wrong, and I need to be punished. That's sort of the energy behind it. And a lot of that comes from my upbringing. A lot of it comes from just, that's how the world is. It's the lack matrix works on reward and punishment. And that's why we can get so out of touch with our hearts and our own uniqueness, and most importantly, our discernment. When we make it about the external world and pleasing people or playing the game, and like, oh, if the world right now, the collective consciousness thinks this is good, so you got to do that, and then you're accepted and you'll be loved and you'll be supported. But if you do what the collective doesn't agree with, you're not going to be supported. And the problem with playing that game is that you're not in touch with your heart. You're not in touch with your power. So you are by default a slave to the matrix. And tuning into our hearts and tuning into our power requires self-acceptance and self-love, because it goes beyond, I am just what I am. And what I learned this week is that we cannot fight against our nature. I am, by my very nature, an empath. I cannot help it. And often I feel like that's the only thing I am. Sometimes I feel that what was coming up for me last week, sometimes I feel like I literally have no gifts beyond that. Like, I know I can talk to people, I can feel people, I can relate to them, and I can read people really, really well. But sometimes I feel like that's all I can do. And I know it's not actually true, but my point is that I've been at war with that at times, and I've tried to change that about me, and I've tried to be like other people, and I've tried to be different. And I realized that we can't go against our nature. And so when I was tuning into specifically the uniqueness, like what makes me unique, what I really came to the conclusion of is that, and I've done it ever since I was a child, is I can shapeshift into anything. I can literally I can fully feel and take on any perspective and any emotional state. And when I was a kid, obviously I didn't learn boundaries. And so, but I also could see people for who they were. And, you know, as most of the time kids are just non-judgmental. They don't have all the programming of what's right and wrong. And so I know that even as a kid, I remember, I know I was very therapeutic to people. Just being in my presence a lot was therapeutic to different siblings, because I could just feel them. And I truly felt for them. And I saw them, and I saw their heart, and I was for them. And I feel like I was for humanity, because why wouldn't I be, unless I would be programmed not to be? And so what I realized about that, about my uniqueness, and this is what I was talking about in our video that I released the other day, is that when we go to war with what we are, in the sense of, for me, as I've come to see where the pattern of being an empath has gotten me in trouble and has not served me and has actually hurt me, and then I went to war with that, it was like I was going to war with my very nature, which actually never works. And the second thing I realized more than anything is that when we don't understand what we are and how it works and what we do, that can also be incredibly detrimental, as I mentioned earlier, because when we don't have discernment, there's times when my gifts are the exact thing that is needed. But if I am in a place of self-hatred or self-criticism, I'm literally sending that energy out as well. So just as much as I can connect with someone and just hold the space, if I'm hating any aspect of myself or at war with it on any level, especially if I'm at war with myself, I'm judging unconsciously that person. And I've had multiple experiences in my life where I've seen how I can hurt people on such a deep level. As much as I can heal and be present and validate and hold space, I can also hurt, and I have hurt people unintentionally on deep levels because they'll feel like I'm so safe. And then all of a sudden, in my world, I'm having a flare-up with my own self and going through self-rejection on a major level. And I've been incredibly self-abusive in the past to myself. And the people around me feel it. And so what I narrowed down with my uniqueness is that when I have to have discernment about how to use my gifts, because if I don't have discernment, that same gift can be detrimental. It can be painful. It can hurt, not only to myself, but to others. Because when people feel that open to you, that means they're that vulnerable to you. And likewise, with the invincibility chakra, I really had to tune into this and ask myself, like, what makes me invincible? How did I survive? Because, I mean, truthfully, and I know you guys all have your own stories as well, but when I think about my childhood, it was chaotic from the get-go. I mean, you guys know, most of you who follow me, my parents were polygamist, and when I was really young, I didn't really know that. I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't even really understand that aspect of it until I was a lot older. But we moved all the time because if anyone found out, we'd have to move because it was illegal and we could be taken away. My older siblings were always told, like, you can't tell anyone. There was always stuff going on. My mom had 8 kids that she was raising on her own because my dad was not in the picture half the time because he had another wife. And it was just, we were in survival mode, just pure survival mode. And all of my siblings struggled, especially when they were in junior high and high school. And empathed that and felt it. And like, I felt so powerless all the time as a child. But when I really thought about how did I survive that? One of the abilities that I realized I developed is, especially being the youngest, I think this is part of how youngest do anyway, but also being an empath, is I know how to feel the energy of an entire room, and if I need to stir the pot in a certain way to get the energy to shift, I can do that. In other words, it's kind of the equivalent of being emotionally manipulative. And that's part of my invincibility. And I've seen how even that can actually be a really good thing in certain business situations or in friends with groups or creating magical things. Like my family, we've always like created a lot of adventure type of stuff, and even in business wise. And so I know that power to stir the pot can be used for magic, and it can be super powerful because I can feel when energy needs to be shifted and when it's rising, and I can stir it. I can stir the pot and make it go in a certain direction, or I used it when I was young to sometimes like create more drama because it was the only place that I felt like I had power or any sort of value, because I was also used as like the family spy a lot. So my siblings would kind of jokingly in a way, but like kind of play me against everyone else. And I just wanted to be loved by anyone or, like on anyone's team. And I was a lot younger than everyone else. So I think that's how I learned how to be a chameleon too, because I equally loved everyone and equally wanted to be there for everyone, and I was equally on everyone's team. But I could fully be on this person's team and then this person's team. And again, that is something that as I've looked at my shadow and how to do shadow integration, because when we create unconsciously, our gifts, our uniqueness, and our invincibility can work against us if we don't understand the power of it. So that's an aspect of me that I've had to really look at as I've done shadow work, and I've seen some ways that I've always identified with being good, kind of, and being, in terms of how I care about people, but I've realized, wow, I can be incredibly manipulative, and it can be and if I don't stay on top of what is my intention, like in this situation, because oftentimes I realize I'm moving energy and kind of playing things, and not even with any intention necessarily. I'm just going with, like, riding the emotion, just letting my emotions sort of ride me, or, take control, whatever you call it. And so these two aspects of me, as I've been learning to integrate who I am and integrate my power, I've had to come to terms with, this is my invincibility and it's my uniqueness, and it can be healing if I'm strategic about it and wise and discerning, because there's certain situations, like I said, where especially this invincibility gift of mine, it can be used for such awesome things, and I've felt it, and people around me have felt it, and I know it's powerful, but I've also felt it when it hurts, and I don't like it, and it has hurt me and it has hurt others in the past. And same with the uniqueness aspect of me. And so at the core of this, it's really about how it's about discernment, and to the level at which we can become emotionally intelligent and also understand ourselves is the level that we have mastery. Because when we start really understanding what we are without judgment, we can just start being strategic about it. And now I try to, it's just only been recently, within the last year or couple years, that I've really realized that helping people is a choice. And going back to the uniqueness aspect of me, the empathic side of me, the shapeshifter side, the chameleon side, is I also was raised with this idea that, like, that's what you should do to be a nice person. And so often I would neglect how I really felt, or I wouldn't use discernment. I didn't know how to use discernment to tell if I was really needed in a situation. And so sometimes my default of needing to help because I felt like I was supposed to help or supposed to be there or supposed to open up a space really wasn't my space to open and wasn't my place to be there, and maybe they needed to learn another lesson. And so again, it requires such incredible discernment to know when to use your gifts and when to back off, and to know it's a choice. And I remember recently I watched this video on YouTube. There's a psychologist, which I'll post him in here because he's great for those of you who are empaths. I can't remember his name at the moment, but he has a YouTube channel. He's a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I think. I can't remember which one, out of Australia, but he specializes in empaths. And one of the ways that he described an empath who is fully functioning, like a high-functioning empath, is that they understand that helping is a choice. It's not an obligation. They don't have to. And understanding that is something that I knew exactly what he was talking about when he said that. Because I was like, yes, that's the distinguishing thing I can say is a difference between me now and me even 5 years ago. Is I still didn't really, I started to know at that point that it was a choice, but I would get myself in situations where I felt locked in and then super obligated to people because I already opened the space for them. And then I would realize way too late that it's not a space I wanted to be in. And then I would feel like if I back out of this, it's going to hurt them. And then so it just caused all these conflicting emotions within me. Or I would just, you guys know this, those of you who are empaths, I would attract a lot of people into my life who were just takers and just consumers, and that use you as a source, a food source, and it's not a mutual thing. And so learning discernment is really what this synergy that we are working with this week is all about. It's learning what our power is, how our power works, and how to have discernment, when to use it. That's the tuning into the heart part. And the only way we can truly know what is right is if we tune in and decide and tune into what we feel first. It's not the only thing we tune in. We can tune into us, get the data that we need, and then tune into the external and feel that out. And then the discernment comes in as what's a win-win-win. Because again, we're not in the realm of sacrifice anymore. Sacrifice is part of the lack matrix. It's not part of heaven on earth. Heaven on earth is, it's a win for me, it's a win for you, it's a win for the planet. It's a win for my body, it's a win for my mind, it's a win for my heart. All aspects of me. If I sacrifice any aspect of me, I'm sacrificing a vital aspect of me, and I'll always need to go get it. And that's how we get in these perpetual cycles where we never feel whole. And as I mentioned also in the video, I think either on Monday or Wednesday, is that we can get attached to the victim role. And because if we keep doing that, if we keep letting the external reality be our navigation, and we have this powerful belief that we have to be right according to whatever the external is, A, it's always changing, and B, we can't actually control it. And so we become a slave. And then that slavery can cause a sense of resentment. And if we stay in that sort of resentment, powerlessness place, we never actually get free, which is miserable. But anger and being a victim feels better than feeling totally powerless. And so you see how it can get this cycle of feeling powerless and then angry and then guilty about the anger and then going back to feeling powerless and then angry and then guilty and then back to powerless. So there is an aspect of all of this that's not just about shadow integration, but it's about integrating all that we are. And that involves fully accepting ourselves, fully forgiving ourselves, fully accepting ourselves, and fully allowing ourselves to be what we are. Even if what we are, the interesting thing about life is everything that was created was, in a sense, created from lack, at least as far as I know. Like, every idea even comes from, this doesn't exist, and you see a need, and so then, or a desire or a want, but it's something that you feel you're lacking on some level, and then you create, and it becomes, and you become more and more and more and more of what you are as you integrate your desires. And so if we make an enemy of desire or make an enemy of creation, which often creation involves destruction, then we're making an enemy of what we are. And it just never works. And that is why I truly believe the world is at war with itself and that humanity is at war with itself right now, because we have not fully forgiven ourselves. We see the trauma, we see the war, we see the wounding, we see the victims, we feel like victims, we see the oppression. We've been oppressed, but we don't know how to get out of it because we keep going to war with it. We keep thinking if we can eradicate that or silence that or just take that out of our consciousness or not look at that or punish that person, then that's somehow going to fix it. But it doesn't, because it doesn't include healing at the deepest level. And healing involves love. Love really is the only way to heal something, to truly restore. And when we have pain and trauma involved in what we're trying to restore, and true wounds where we've truly been victimized, we have to allow space to feel angry, to feel even resentment, to feel all those things that maybe feel uncomfortable to feel. And the problem, you've heard me say this before, but the problem with just trying to be positive and just get on a positive kick is that it doesn't allow for that. And then once again, the aspect of us that has been victimized is silenced. And so it creates this need for us to be incredibly emotionally intelligent. And that's why these tools that we're learning, how to tune in, how to let other people be emotionally sovereign. You are an emotionally sovereign being. You're an emotionally sovereign creator. I have zero control over what you're thinking right now, what you're feeling right now. There's things that I might say that trigger you. There's things that might really resonate. I might totally not resonate on any level. I don't have control of that. And if I spent all my time trying to figure out, which I've done, that's another skill that I really feel like my invincibility skills, I really learned how to read people's minds. Legit read people's minds. From the time I was really little, I didn't even know how strongly I did it. And I've had to learn how to tune out other people's thoughts because I was so tuned in. And those of you who grew up in an abusive home probably have a very similar skill to this. When you know when there's abuse going on, and mine wasn't physical abuse, although sometimes from some of my older siblings it was definitely borderline that. But it's more of you want to be preemptive. Like you can sense, you become super, when you're just powerless, especially when you're the youngest or you're the most vulnerable or the most powerless in the situation, like when you're a child, all you can do is feel. That's all you can do. And so I got really good at feeling the temperature of the room, feeling the temperature of the energy that everyone was creating. And I could see something coming way before it came. And I could tell, I could read my siblings so well. I could tell when they were upset and what they would do if they were upset. And so I survived by, again, kind of being the peacemaker or just the distraction, or I just knew how to shift the energy in just the right way to sort of deflect it coming towards me. And that sort of being able to sort of always divert the attention or divert having to look at something has also been what has caused me to not fully be able to face certain things. Do you know what I mean? And so again, when we look at the things that that made us invincible, that helped us survive, we can also see the negative side of it. And that's why going through all this can feel really difficult. And again, I know we just started this cleanse and I know it's a beta test, and I'm kind of just this part I'm just teaching for the first time. So it will be more organized, and I've like kind of struggled with how do I organize this and how do I actually get to like the real depth of what I'm trying to say and how do I give valuable processes that actually help. But I realized that it was so important that wasn't the case right off the bat, because I could really feel not only my own stuff, but just like the reality of how counterintuitive it can feel to put yourself first and to tune into yourself and not make it about everyone else. You know, going back to last week, it really triggered me for some reason. I was so worried about everyone in the class and so worried that people weren't getting it, and so worried that not only that people weren't getting it, that I was just doing not a good job. Because even when I recorded the stuff I put out, all of them so far, it's been really weird, because usually I feel like I have a pretty good flow and I can just sort of channel, which is what I feel like I do. But I was like so aware of this other aspect, like I said, kind of looking at me, and I felt super uncomfortable. And I knew, I was like, okay, universe, I said I was going to do it with them. I said I was going to show up and be vulnerable. I said I was just going to actually be in it. And what I realized was like, I needed the material to be a lot more organized. And I didn't know I needed that until I experienced it, if that makes sense. But it triggered me so much because I felt powerless. Like, oh no, like I can't control what people think. I don't know how to remedy it. I don't know how to I was just, for whatever reason, I was so emotionally triggered that nothing good was coming, what felt like nothing like clear to me was coming through. And so I just felt like I just had to feel it. I just had to feel it. I just had to be in it. I had to accept that it's okay. Like, that happens sometimes. It's okay. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, it was just is what it is, you know? And so it's really been an interesting thing. Like, I went to therapy today and I talked about it a lot. Like, just how this class has been specifically for me, and going into the material and realizing this. But I feel like what I've tapped into, like, inside of me, I feel it and see it so clearly. And my body almost like shakes in excitement when I feel the reality of this understanding coming through. And I know, like I said, I don't necessarily know exactly how to make it universal, I guess, so to speak, which is why I'm so excited to hear from you guys. But I do know that us really, really learning about this synergy between our heart, our invincibility, and our uniqueness, kind of that soul energy, like I said, all the other chakras within us just simply amplify the energy that's going on here. All of it, like, it kind of, these are different emotional centers that help express and amplify that. But the synergy of this is what creates our entire energy signature. So if we're at war with ourselves, we have a war vibe, and we're in lack. And if we are working with ourselves, we're working with abundance, because we're working with the idea that there's an infinite amount of potentials, there's an infinite amount of realities, there's always a solution to everything. So therefore, we never have to be stuck in anything, and we never have to just give up or succumb to any reality, especially a reality that is enslaving us. But I think one of the most amazing truths that I've come to is not only do we not have to stay in slavery, but we don't have to go to war at all. We don't have to eradicate any system, because to even doing that is saying these are the only two worlds that exist. But no, there is an infinite amount of realities that you can choose to participate in them, and the lack matrix is just one of them. And so we don't have to go to war with the lack matrix. It's there for a reason. It's there to teach us. There's a reason we jumped into contrast. There's a reason we chose to have an aspect of us sort of taken away. Not that it was ever literally taken away, but we're in a perception of singularity. And so that is a tool, and it's one of our greatest teachers. So going to war with it is going to war with a paradigm that we created to learn and grow and expand, which we don't have to go to war with it. We simply have to transcend it. And we only transcend it by integrating it. And integrating it means integrating the fact that we are creators, and that creative energy comes from here. And it's a mystery. We don't really know. Even science, they have no idea what makes the body conscious. You know, that people can be on life support forever, but we don't know what actually animates a body and makes it conscious. That is still a mystery, and what makes us unique. And that specifically, that why there can be, you know, they have done studies with people, siblings, even twins, that have grown up in the same home with the same kind of parenting in general, and have told two totally different experiences and perceptions and invincibilities, ways that they survived, and uniqueness about them. Just like there's no snowflake that's the same. That is a mystery, and it's just one of the most amazing things about what we are. But we have this tendency to try to make everything the same and everyone the same, because again, in the lack matrix, you're only loved if you are acceptable to the collective. And so it's literally about giving the collective more power than your soul, which doesn't really make any sense, because the power comes from your soul. We're also connected to everyone, but we're unique expressions of the one thing, the one source. And so there's no way that we can all be the same. And there's literally no way that what works for me necessarily can work for you. I have no way of knowing. The only way you can know is by tuning in and knowing yourself. And so I just want to end this by saying, let's see, I wrote it down because I didn't want to forget. Is it on this side? Hold on a second. I may have put it on a different paper. Hold on. I think it's on a different paper. Hold on one sec. It's right over here. I can't find it, so I guess I think I'll just do a separate video about it. Because there was actually 3 main points that I just wanted to drive it home on, and for some reason, I can't find it on here. Unless, hold on, let me just check one more book. I think there was 3 papers. Aha! Yes, here it is. Okay, I was like, I know I have it right here. So these are the 3 takeaways that I would say about what we're focusing on this week. Is 1, we have to get to the point where we realize that helping or anything that we do or don't do is a choice. And that we can, if we don't actually tune in to what's a win for us, what actually feels good for us, if we bypass our own selves, we are always going to be in lack. So it's not selfish at all to tune into yourself and ask yourself what you need. It's not selfish. And it's not only not selfish, but it's essential in terms of developing discernment. So that's number 1, is helping is a choice, and anything you do is a choice. Any way that you respond or any energy that you give to anything is a choice. Number 2, it's important that we work with our nature, not against it. So again, for me, I've really had to look at, my nature is that I am empathic. My nature is that I'm a feeler. My nature is that I kind of absorb energy, and I can't really, it's how I survived. It literally created what I am. So if I go to war with that and try to change that from the core, it's like I'm going to war with my very nature. But instead of going to war, I can work with it. See, again, when is this a good thing? When does it feel good? When does it actually feel like it's helping? And when does it feel like it's harming? And so, it comes back to discernment. So don't fight against your nature, work with your nature. And the only way you can really truly know how to work with your nature is by tuning into what your nature is, not just trying to deny it or suppress it or change it all the time. And I have to just say on a note with that is that I feel like our culture is obsessed with self-help. Like self-help and self-improvement and all those things. And while I totally believe we're here to grow and expand and learn, I feel like kind of behind, a lot of times that energy that's behind self-help is self-hatred. And we're not, and I especially want to make sure I make it clear in this class, is we're not running from who we are, and we're not saying that we need to change who we are. We're actually embracing who we are and loving who we are, all of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So this is not about making an enemy of yourself. It's about actually integrating all of yourself, fully accepting it. And there's a relief in that. There's a relief in just accepting who you are. It doesn't mean you just create unconsciously, because we're here to create consciously, but it means you understand how your power works and use it strategically in the game. And then number 3 is obviously develop discernment. And I really think truly discernment is the win-win-win. Because if it's not a win-win-win, it is not a win. It is not a win for anyone. So when you bypass yourself, even if you think you're doing good, you are not, because you're creating lack in the very action that you do. And that's the biggest thing I had to realize about my uniqueness, is that when I bypass myself, even though in many ways my survival mechanism, that is what protected me. And it was the only way it protected me. So I wasn't bypassing myself when I was originally doing that. It was protecting me. But now that I'm older and I have choices, and I'm not a child anymore, I'm not vulnerable to other people. I mean, we all are to an extent, but I'm not under anyone's thumb, and I can make decisions for myself, and I can say no, and all those things that I didn't know I could do when I was younger. And often you literally can't sometimes when you're younger. Now to keep doing that by default doesn't make sense. To keep bypassing my own, like what's going on in me by default doesn't make sense. And so it's just really important that we understand that to develop discernment really truly means developing a keen awareness of what we are and who we are without judgment, and then using it strategically, not going to war with it. Just use it for you. Use it for you. And if you notice, the people who are lately, especially, what the universe is really rewarding are people who are the most themselves. The people who are the most themselves are making the most money, making a ton of money. Maybe not the most, because we still have power holds in the world, but making a lot of money. Like, the universe is definitely supporting people being themselves, and it's important that we do. So those are the three main aspects I have to say about this whole thing. And let's see, tomorrow is Friday. Yeah, tomorrow I'm going to be releasing a meditation that helps us really connect into this area that we've been working with this week and help us root out beliefs or see beliefs that we have about ourselves, about our uniqueness, and about our power, our invincibility, that are out of alignment with thriving. Because this entire world, this entire reality is based on belief. Everything is based on belief. So your beliefs matter more than anything. And what you think is not exactly what you believe. You might think something logically, but doesn't mean you actually believe it experientially. You believe what you've experienced, and you believe the conclusions you've come to because of your experience. And rightfully so. Experience is the greatest teacher. But what we need to understand is that there can be different experiences. There can be new experiences. We can actually heal experiences that were traumatic. And we can be open to having new experiences. And we can be ourselves, and we can celebrate who we are, and we can have discernment about who we are. And so hopefully that was helpful. I know there's like 8 of you on right now. So if anyone is there, I want to get your questions if you have any. So you can start typing them right now if you have any. But I know that Brad asked in the class, he was talking about having a morning routine, but he's a night owl, and because my last video I was talking about really having a good morning routine. But really, again, that goes right back to, if it doesn't work for you, it's not about necessarily doing something the way I do it, or doing the way something a ton of people say they're doing it. I think it's important to ride your own energy. So there's times in my life where I am a huge night owl, and even lately it's hard for me to fall asleep at night, and I don't necessarily have the exact same routine every morning. I try to really listen to my body. And if I'm up at night and that's what my body wants to do, I ride it. And if I want to sleep, I sleep. And if I want to sleep in, I sleep in. And granted, I have a lifestyle where I can do that. But I think it's something I've really been experimenting with, is like, who gives a shit what even all the people who say to be successful, you have to do this and you have to do that. That doesn't matter. To be successful, you have to be tuned into your own rhythms. And sometimes, depending on what your lifestyle has been and what your relationships have been and what your habits have been, your rhythm might be different. Your rhythm most likely is completely different from other people's. And so if you can see where your rhythm might be hurting you, it's important to look and be able to say, okay, I can see where that's getting in my way. But if you then go to war with your own rhythm, you're going to war with yourself. So it's just more about, how can I get more in alignment with my rhythm that I'm in, the pattern that I'm already in. And this goes back to our invincibility. We create certain patterns. We're in the patterns we're in because we've been surviving. And most of the stuff we do to survive, and we just don't know that we can thrive. And so for me, what's really helped is tuning into my patterns. And instead of getting really mad at myself, which most of my life I've been at war with my patterns, because I've just really never learned good like organizational skills or being on a good routine, because like I said, my childhood was extremely chaotic, and we moved, literally from the time I was born to the time I was 12 years old, we had moved 11 times. So that's I couldn't really count on anything being the same, and so I had to just go with the flow. And it's so much a part of me that it almost feels like pulling teeth to try to have like a regular routine. And finally I was just like, I'm done. I am so done believing that in order to be successful or happy, I have to have a really steady whatever, like a steady routine. I have to do what everyone else does, because it just quite literally is not. I was raised a different way. My patterning at a core level is different. And yes, it can be changed. But what I've realized is the more that I just allow myself to go with my patterning and not go to war with it in my mind, I naturally start adjusting to healthier and healthier habits. But when I go to war with it, it causes me to get stuck in a stronghold, a pattern stronghold, where I feel like I'm bad and I feel like I'm wrong because I'm not doing what you should do and what the world says you should do or what successful people do. And so I'm bad. And it's like I'm creating that reality. I'm literally activating the belief I'm bad because I don't do it the way other people do it. And that has been the number one thing I've really tried to get rid of, because I live by myself. I have my own routine. I don't work for anyone. And so I've realized like I'm the one creating the rules. Like I'm the only one. And I'm my boss. So I realized I was carrying all this stuff over from how the world functions and judging myself through that lens. And the more I've let that go, the more successful I've been, the happier I've been, the healthier I've been. And anytime I get triggered into comparing myself to others or feeling like I'm somehow wrong because I'm definitely a spontaneous person, then it trips me up. So that took me a long time to answer that question. But Brad, I hope that was helpful for you. Just really work with your rhythms and allow it to be okay. I like this phrase that people say, don't should all over yourself. Like, it's not about what you should or shouldn't do. It's about what feels right for you. And again, it's about developing discernment. And if we could just get out of the idea that we have to somehow all be in agreement about what's right to do, then we would save ourselves a lot of issues, because what's right for me may not be right for you. That's why there's the saying, one man's medicine is another man's poison. And discernment is how we know what's our poison and what's our medicine.